The most feared man in the city found me in the one place nobody was supposed to enter, and the strangest part was not that I was there. It was what he did next. I still remember the sound of the mountains that evening, the quiet wind moving through the trees, the soft water flowing through the private hot spring hidden behind the old estate. I thought I was completely alone. I thought I had found a peaceful place far away from the noise of everyday life. I had no idea I had stepped into the private world of Adrian Cross. The name meant nothing to me at first. I did not know the stories. I did not know the reputation. I did not know that people across the city spoke about him with a mixture of respect and caution. To me, he was simply the man standing a few feet away, looking more surprised than angry. I expected him to demand answers. I expected cold words. I expected the kind of reaction people always described when they talked about powerful men. But Adrian Cross did something I never expected. He stopped. He looked at me carefully, not as a problem to solve, but as a person standing in front of him. "Are you lost?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost too calm for someone who had just discovered a stranger in a place he considered completely private. I explained the misunderstanding, the directions I received, the mistake that brought me there. Adrian listened without interrupting. That alone surprised me. Most people with his kind of confidence would have already made a decision. But he simply listened. "You really do not know where you are?" he asked. I shook my head. "No. If I knew, I would not have come here." For the first time, I noticed something different in his expression. Not anger, curiosity. It was as if he was trying to understand how someone could stand in front of him without knowing his name or fearing his presence. Later, I would learn that almost everyone who met Adrian Cross already had an opinion about him before he ever spoke. They saw the power. They saw the influence. They saw the image created around him. But I saw something else. I saw a man who looked unexpectedly tired. The kind of tiredness that did not come from a long day, but from carrying too much for too long. Adrian eventually stepped back and gave me space. "You should leave before the weather changes," he said. It was not a command. It sounded almost like concern. That moment stayed with me because it did not match the stories I would later hear about him. The man everyone described as unreachable had shown me a small moment of kindness when he had no reason to. I thought that would be the end of it. A strange encounter. A forgotten memory. A story I would tell someday about the night I accidentally entered a place that was never meant for me. But I was wrong. Because when I walked away from that mountain estate, I did not know that Adrian Cross was watching the road disappear behind me. I did not know that the woman who had entered his hidden world by mistake had become the first person in years who made him question the walls he had built around himself. I thought the strange meeting at the mountain estate would become nothing more than a memory. A story I would tell myself whenever I needed to remember that unexpected moments could happen anywhere. But life has a way of bringing certain people back when we least expect it. A few days after that evening, I returned to my normal routine. My small apartment. My morning coffee. My quiet shifts at the local cafe. Everything felt ordinary again. And that was exactly what I wanted. I had no reason to think about Adrian Cross. I had no reason to wonder about the mysterious man who owned a private estate hidden in the mountains. But then he walked into the cafe. At first, I did not recognize him. Without the dramatic surroundings of the estate, without the silence of the mountains around him, Adrian looked different. Still confident, still composed, but somehow more human. He stood near the counter and looked around the small cafe like he was visiting a place completely unfamiliar to him. "You work here?" he asked when he noticed me. I smiled slightly. "Yes. And you drink coffee?" He looked almost amused by the question. "Is that surprising?" "A little," I admitted. "You seem like someone who would have someone make it for you." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Adrian smiled. It was small, almost impossible to notice. But it was the first genuine expression I had seen from him. Maybe I wanted to try something different. I did not know why that answer stayed with me. Maybe because it sounded like he was not talking about coffee. He was talking about something much bigger. Adrian sat near the window and stayed longer than I expected. We talked about simple things. The weather, the mountains, the quiet life outside the city. He asked questions about my work and my dreams, and I noticed something unusual. He actually listened. Most people asked questions because they were waiting for their chance to speak. Adrian listened as if every answer mattered. Over time, I started noticing the difference between the man people described and the man sitting across from me. The world saw Adrian Cross as someone untouchable, someone surrounded by power and influence. But the person I saw was someone who seemed unfamiliar with ordinary conversations. Someone who looked surprised when people treated him normally. Do people always act differently around you? I asked one afternoon. Adrian looked at his coffee for a moment before answering. Usually. Why? He gave a quiet smile. Because they already decided who I am before they meet me. I understood that feeling more than he probably realized. Everyone carried assumptions about others. But with Adrian, those assumptions seemed heavier. Like a story had been written about him long before he had the chance to tell his own. And who are you? I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of the answer. I do not know if many people have ever asked me that. His honesty surprised me. Adrian Cross was someone who seemed to have every answer. Yet when it came to himself, he seemed lost. Before he left that day, he stopped near the door. Thank you for the coffee. I smiled. You paid for it. He looked slightly amused. That is not what I meant. After he left, I watched him disappear down the street. I still did not know who Adrian Cross truly was. I did not know about the world he came from. I did not know the responsibilities he carried or the secrets hidden behind his name. But I knew one thing. The man who had entered my life by accident was beginning to feel less like a stranger. And somehow, I had a feeling he felt the same. I used to think the most difficult thing about understanding someone was learning their secrets. But after spending more time with Adrian Cross, I realized something different. The hardest part was understanding the silence between those secrets. The things a person never says. The memories they avoid. The emotions they hide because they believe nobody would understand them. After Adrian started visiting the cafe, our conversations became something I quietly looked forward to. It was strange because he was not the kind of person I expected to become familiar with. His world seemed completely different from mine. My days were filled with coffee orders, friendly conversations, and small routines. His life seemed filled with decisions, expectations, and responsibilities I could not imagine. Yet somehow, when we sat across from each other, those differences disappeared. One afternoon, the cafe was almost empty. Rain covered the windows, creating a peaceful rhythm in the background. Adrian looked outside for a long moment before speaking. Do you ever wonder if you are living the life you actually wanted? The question surprised me. It was not the kind of thing I expected from him. Sometimes, I answered. What about you? Adrian looked down at his coffee. For a few seconds, he said nothing. Then he quietly replied. I think I spent a long time becoming someone everyone else needed me to be. That answer revealed more than he probably intended. I realized Adrian was not someone who lacked confidence. He was someone who had spent years carrying a role so carefully that he forgot where the role ended and the real person began. Do you regret it? I asked. Adrian looked at me. Regret is complicated. Why? Because every choice leads you somewhere. Even the choices you wish you could change become part of who you are. I listened carefully. There was something different about him in that moment. The confidence was still there, but behind it was a quiet sadness. It made me wonder how many people had ever taken the time to ask Adrian what he wanted instead of what he could provide. A few days later, I saw another side of his life. I was surprised when he arrived at the cafe with a completely different atmosphere around him. People who recognized him became careful with their words. The friendly conversations nearby became quieter. That was when I finally understood. Adrian Cross was not just a successful man. He was someone whose name carried a weight I had not realized. After he left, I searched for information about him. What I found surprised me. Articles, rumors, stories about a man known for influence and power. A man many people respected, but few people truly knew. I stared at the screen for a long time. Suddenly, the quiet conversations, the careful expressions, and the way people reacted around him made sense. The man sitting across from me was not just a mysterious stranger from the mountains. He was someone with an entire world attached to his name. When Adrian returned the next day, I wondered if I should act differently. Should I be more careful? Should I treat him the way everyone else did? But when he walked through the door, I realized something. The person I had spoken to was still the same person standing in front of me. You know now, don't you? He asked. I looked at him. Yes. He waited for my reaction, but I simply said, I still do not know you completely. For the first time, Adrian looked surprised. And I think that is okay, I continued. A name can tell me what people think about you. It does not tell me who you are. He did not answer immediately, but the expression on his face told me something had changed. Maybe because for once, someone had seen the name Adrian Cross and still wanted to know the person behind it. I used to think knowing someone's reputation meant knowing the person behind it. But after discovering who Adrian Cross truly was, I realized how wrong that belief could be. A reputation is only a story told by other people. The truth is usually much quieter. It exists in the moments nobody sees, the choices nobody notices, the feelings someone keeps hidden because they believe showing them would make them weaker. After I learned about Adrian's world, I expected things between us to change. I thought the distance created by his name would become impossible to ignore. I thought I would see him differently. But when he returned to the cafe, he was still the same person who had sat by the window and talked about simple things. The same person who asked about my dreams before talking about his own. The same person who seemed surprised when someone treated him normally. "You are not afraid of me?" Adrian asked one afternoon. His question caught me off guard. I looked at him and thought about everything I had learned. The rumors, the reputation, the way people changed their behavior when he entered a room. "Should I be?" I asked. He looked away for a moment. "Most people are." I smiled softly. "Maybe most people only know the version of you that they have heard about." Adrian was quiet after that. I could tell those words reached a place he did not often allow anyone to see. A few days later, he invited me to visit the mountain estate again. This time, I knew exactly where I was going. I knew the place belonged to him. I knew the man waiting there was someone many people considered untouchable. But when I arrived, I did not see a powerful figure surrounded by luxury. I saw a man standing alone in a place that was beautiful but strangely quiet. The estate was impressive. The large windows overlooked the mountains. The rooms carried a sense of history. Everything showed success. Yet somehow, the place still felt empty. "Do you spend a lot of time here alone?" I asked. Adrian looked around before answering. "More than I should." That answer stayed with me. Because someone like Adrian Cross had everything people dreamed about having. But he still seemed to be searching for something he could not buy. We walked through the property while the evening light covered the mountains. For the first time, Adrian showed me places that were not meant for guests or business conversations. He showed me old photographs, memories from years before his name became known. "I barely remember who I was before all of this," he admitted. I looked at the photographs. "Maybe you do remember. Maybe you just stopped looking." Adrian looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "You always say things nobody else says. Maybe because everyone else is too busy seeing what they expect to see." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt comfortable, not empty, comfortable. That was when I understood something about Adrian. He was not someone who needed more power. He was someone who had spent so long protecting himself that he forgot what it felt like to simply exist without a responsibility attached. Before I left, Adrian walked me to the entrance. "Emily," he said. I turned around. "Yes." He hesitated. It was a small moment, but I noticed it. Adrian Cross, a man who seemed to control every situation, was searching for the right words. "Thank you for not treating me differently." I smiled. Everyone deserves to be seen as more than one thing. He looked at me quietly, and in that moment, I realized something had changed. I was no longer just the stranger who accidentally entered his private world. I had become someone Adrian trusted enough to show the parts of himself he usually kept hidden. I used to believe that powerful people were surrounded by people who truly knew them. I thought influence created connections. I thought success meant never having to feel alone. But after spending more time with Adrian Cross, I started to understand something different. Sometimes the people with the most control over their world are the ones who have the fewest places where they can be completely honest. After my visit to the estate, our conversations changed. Adrian still carried the same confidence everyone recognized. He was still the man whose name made people pause before speaking. But around me, he slowly became someone different. Someone who asked questions without expecting anything in return. Someone who listened instead of simply giving instructions. One afternoon, he came to the cafe earlier than usual. The place was quiet, with only a few customers sitting near the windows. Adrian looked more relaxed than I had ever seen him. "You always come here when you want to disappear?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "Maybe. Does it work?" I wondered. Adrian looked around the cafe. "More than you would think." I understood what he meant. Here, nobody cared about his reputation. Nobody treated him like a symbol of power. He could simply sit, drink coffee, and have a normal conversation. Something most people probably considered ordinary felt rare for him. As we talked, I noticed he was more open than before. Not completely. There were still parts of himself he protected. but the distance between us was smaller. Do you ever wish you had a different life? I asked. Adrian thought about the question. I used to. And now? He looked at me before answering. Now I wonder if I can still choose something different. That answer surprised me, because Adrian Cross did not sound like someone who believed his future was already decided. He sounded like someone discovering that he still had choices. A few days later, I noticed another side of his life. I saw how quickly people changed when they realized he was nearby. Conversations became more careful. Expressions became more serious. It reminded me that Adrian was not just the quiet man from the cafe. He belonged to a world I only knew from the outside. A world built on expectations and responsibilities. When I asked him about it, he did not avoid the question. People see the position before they see the person, he said. That is easier for them. Is it easier for you? I asked. Adrian looked away. Sometimes. That simple answer told me more than anything else. Being feared could be easier than being understood. Being respected could be easier than being known. But I also saw that Adrian was beginning to question that. Later that evening, he invited me to walk through the gardens at the estate. The sunset covered everything in warm golden light. For a moment, the world felt peaceful. You know what is strange? Adrian said. What? I have spent years building a life where nobody could get too close. And now I cannot remember why I wanted that. I looked at him. Maybe because you were protecting yourself. He nodded slowly. Maybe. That moment felt important. Not because Adrian suddenly became a different person. Change does not happen that quickly. But because he was finally willing to admit that something in his life was missing. Before I left, Adrian stopped near the entrance. Emily. I turned around. Yes. He paused. I do not know what this is becoming. I smiled. Maybe it does not need a name yet. Adrian looked at me quietly. And for the first time, I saw something beyond confidence and control. I saw uncertainty. I saw hope. I saw a man who had spent years believing he needed to stand alone, slowly realizing that maybe he did not have to. I used to think the biggest secrets were the ones people tried hardest to hide. But after knowing Adrian Cross, I realized that sometimes the most important secrets are the ones people hide from themselves. The truth they avoid because accepting it would mean admitting that something inside them needs to change. After everything that happened between us, I noticed Adrian was different. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would make the world notice. It was something much quieter. The small moments. The way he allowed himself to laugh at simple things. The way he stopped looking over his shoulder during our conversations. The way he seemed less like a man protecting an image and more like someone trying to understand his own feelings. But I also noticed something else. There were still parts of his life that remained untouched. Certain questions he avoided. Certain memories that made his expression change. One evening at the estate, we sat outside while the mountains disappeared beneath the evening sky. The silence between us felt comfortable, but I could sense something was on his mind. You have been quiet today, I said. Adrian looked toward the distance. There are things I have not told you. I waited. I knew Adrian was not someone who shared personal things easily. Why not? I asked. He took a moment before answering. Because some things are easier to carry alone. His words stayed with me. I understood that feeling. Everyone has moments they keep hidden because they believe sharing them will make them seem weaker. But I also believe that carrying everything alone eventually becomes its own kind of burden. Maybe you do not have to carry everything alone anymore. I said. Adrian looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the person behind the reputation again. The man who wanted to be understood but was unsure how to let someone try. A few days later, I learned that someone from Adrian's past had returned. I did not know all the details. Adrian did not explain everything immediately, but I noticed the change. The calm confidence he usually carried became more thoughtful. He spent more time reflecting, more time looking at old memories that he rarely mentioned. Is this about your past? I asked. Adrian nodded. Part of it. And are you afraid? The question came out before I could stop it. Adrian looked surprised. Maybe because nobody asked him questions like that. I do not know if afraid is the right word, he said. Maybe I am wondering if the person I became is someone I still want to be. That answer showed me something important. Adrian was not worried about losing his reputation. He was worried about losing the possibility of becoming someone different. Later that week, I saw how much his world affected him. People around him expected him to remain the same person they had always known. They expected certainty. They expected control. They expected Adrian Cross to never question himself. But I had seen something they had not. I had seen the man who wondered if he had chosen the right path. I had seen the person beneath the name. One evening before I left, Adrian said something that surprised me. Most people know what I do. Very few people ask why. I looked at him. Maybe because the why is the part that matters most. He smiled slightly. It was not a confident smile. It was something more honest. A smile from someone who finally felt like he did not have to explain everything at once. But I knew this was only the beginning. Adrian's past was returning, and with it came questions he could no longer ignore. The man who spent years building walls around himself was finally facing the reason those walls existed in the first place. I used to believe that the hardest battles people faced were the ones everyone could see. But I learned something different from Adrian Cross. The most difficult battles are often silent. They happen inside a person's mind, where nobody else can see the questions, the doubts, and the choices that shape who they become. After someone from Adrian's past returned, I noticed a change in him. He was still the same man everyone respected. He was still calm, thoughtful, and in control. But there was a weight behind his eyes that had not been there before. It was as if he was standing between two versions of himself. The person he had spent years becoming and the person he was beginning to discover. I wanted to ask what was happening, but I knew Adrian. He was someone who opened doors slowly. He did not share his thoughts because someone demanded answers. He shared them when he believed someone truly wanted to understand. One evening, we walked through the garden at the estate. The air was cool, and the mountains were quiet around us. "You do not have to tell me anything you are not ready to share," I said. Adrian looked at me with a thoughtful expression. Most people would ask questions. Maybe they are asking because they want information. I am asking because I care. For a moment, Adrian said nothing. Then he smiled slightly. It was a small reaction, but I noticed it. "You always make things more difficult." I laughed softly. "How?" "Because you make me think about things I usually ignore." His answer stayed with me. Because that was exactly what was happening. Adrian was beginning to look at parts of himself he had avoided for years. A few days later, I finally met someone connected to his past. His name was Victor Hale. The moment Adrian saw him, I understood there was history between them. Not the kind of history people talk about openly. The kind that carries memories and unfinished conversations. Victor looked at Adrian differently than everyone else did. He did not see the powerful man everyone respected. He saw the person Adrian had been before. After Victor left, Adrian remained quiet. "Who was he?" I asked. Adrian looked toward the window. "Someone who knew me before I became this." I thought about those words. Before he became this. It was such a simple sentence, but it revealed so much. Adrian had spent years believing his identity was connected to the role he carried, the expectations, the responsibility, the image. "Do you miss who you were before?" I asked. Adrian took a deep breath. "Sometimes I do not know who that person was anymore." I looked at him and realized how much that answer mattered. Adrian Cross was not afraid of his past because he was ashamed of it. He was afraid because it reminded him of choices he could never completely forget. But there was something different now. Before, he would have closed himself off. He would have created distance. He would have returned to the person everyone expected him to be. Instead, he stayed. He talked. He allowed someone to see the uncertainty beneath the confidence. That was the moment I realized Adrian was changing. Not because someone forced him to. Not because he wanted to prove anything. He was changing because he finally allowed himself to question the life he had built. Before I left that night, Adrian stopped me. "Emily." I turned around. "Yes." He looked at me for a moment. "Thank you for reminding me that I have a choice." I smiled. "Everyone has a choice." Adrian nodded slowly, but I knew what he meant. For years, he believed his path had already been decided. Now, for the first time, he was considering a different future, and I knew that choice would change everything. I used to think that changing someone's life required a dramatic moment. A single event that completely transformed everything in an instant. But watching Adrian Cross change taught me something different. Real transformation happens quietly. It begins with small decisions. Small moments where a person chooses something different from what they have always known. After Adrian finally admitted that he had a choice, I noticed a new confidence in him. Not the kind of confidence people associated with his reputation. This was different. It was the confidence of someone who was beginning to understand himself. The return of Victor Hale had brought back memories Adrian had avoided for years. But instead of hiding from them, Adrian faced them. He did not pretend the past did not exist. He He simply decided that the past did not have to control his future. One evening, Adrian and I sat in the same garden where we had talked many times before. The mountains surrounded us, quiet and endless. "Do you think people can really change?" Adrian asked. The question surprised me. "Yes," I answered. "Why?" he asked. I looked at him. "Because I have seen you change." Adrian looked away for a moment. "I do not feel different. Maybe because you are still the person living through the change. Other people notice it first." He thought about that. I could tell he was remembering the person he used to be. The man who never allowed anyone close. The man who believed emotions were weaknesses. The man who thought carrying everything alone was the only way forward. But that person was slowly disappearing. Not because Adrian rejected his past, because he finally understood it. A few days later, I saw how much his decision affected the people around him. Some people expected Adrian to return to the person they knew. They expected him to remain distant and impossible to understand. But Adrian surprised them. He began making choices based on what he believed was right instead of what was expected from him. That was when I realized something important. Adrian's greatest strength was never his reputation. It was his ability to choose who he wanted to become. One afternoon, we walked through the estate and stopped near the private hot spring where our story had first begun. The place looked completely different to me now. At first, it had represented a world I knew nothing about. A world of mystery and power. But now it represented something else. A place where two completely different people had met and somehow found understanding. "Do you ever think about that first day?" I asked. Adrian smiled. "More than you would expect." "Why?" He looked around the quiet surroundings. "Because that was the first time in years someone saw me without knowing my name." I smiled. Maybe that was why it mattered. Adrian nodded. Maybe. That simple word carried so much meaning. Because Adrian Cross had spent years being defined by his name. But the person who changed him was someone who knew nothing about that name when they first met. Someone who only saw a person, standing in front of her. Later that evening, Adrian told me something I would never forget. "I spent my entire life trying to become someone nobody could hurt." He paused. "But I never realized I was also becoming someone nobody could reach." I understood then that Adrian was not just changing his life. He was finally allowing himself to live it. The world might always remember him as a powerful man. Some people might always judge him by his past. But I knew something they did not. Behind the reputation, behind the expectations, behind everything people believed about Adrian Cross, there was a man who had finally learned that being understood was more valuable than being feared. And as I looked at him standing beneath the evening sky, I knew the hardest part was not changing who he was. The hardest part was accepting that he deserved the chance to become someone new. I used to believe that people were defined by the moments that changed them. The unforgettable events. The unexpected meetings. The choices that forced them to become someone different. But after everything I experienced with Adrian Cross, I realized something deeper. People are not defined by one single moment. They are defined by what they choose to do after that moment. When I first met Adrian, I only saw a stranger. A man standing in a place where our worlds accidentally crossed. I did not know his name. I did not know his reputation. I did not know the weight that came with being Adrian Cross. I only saw someone who seemed distant, someone carrying a quiet loneliness behind a calm expression. Over time, I learned that the man everyone respected was also a man who had spent years hiding parts of himself. He believed control was protection. He believed distance was safety. He believed that allowing people close meant giving them the chance to see his weaknesses. But slowly, he learned something different. Trust was not a weakness. Being understood was not something to fear. And opening his heart did not make him less powerful. It made him more human. After everything with his past was finally faced, Adrian seemed lighter. Not because his responsibilities disappeared. Not because the world suddenly became simple. But because he no longer carried everything alone. One evening, we returned to the mountain estate. The same place where everything had started. The same quiet surroundings where I had first met the man behind the reputation. Adrian stood near the hot spring and looked across the mountains. "It is strange," he said. "What is?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "For years, this place was where I came to escape from the world. Now it reminds me of the moment my world started changing." I looked at him. "Do you think you would have changed without that day?" Adrian thought about it. "Maybe eventually. But I do not think I would have understood what I was missing." His answer stayed with me. Because I knew the truth. I did not save Adrian Cross. I did not rebuild his life for him. He did that himself. I only reminded him that there was still a person beneath everything the world expected him to be. The man who once believed he needed to stand alone finally understood the value of having someone beside him. The man who was known for power discovered that kindness could be just as strong. The man who thought his past controlled him realized that he still had the ability to choose his future. Looking back, I think the most surprising part of our story was not that two completely different people found each other. It was that they helped each other see something they had forgotten. I learned that even the strongest people can need understanding. Adrian learned that even someone who has everything can still be searching for something meaningful. The world may always remember Adrian Cross as a powerful man. Some may only see the reputation. Some may only remember the stories. But I will always remember something different. I will remember the quiet moments, the conversations nobody else heard, the person behind the name. Because sometimes the most unexpected person enters your life not to change who you are, but to remind you who you were always meant to become. And sometimes the greatest transformation begins with something simple. One person choosing to truly see another.